So, what are your thoughts on age gap relationships?
Yeah, so they just used to be normal throughout history. And in fact, even till like I think honestly this century, aka 20 years ago, about they were just accepted as being normal. Because I think nowadays even something like what would you say? What would be considered a big age gap? Obviously not 1 or 2 years, right? But what would we consider a noticeable age gap where people are gonna be like, huh, I don't know about that.
In the modern world right now, probably like 10 plus
10
years.
plus? Okay.
Yeah.
My feeling is that people do that even with 4 years, right? If you're thinking about, for example, say an 18-year-old and a college graduate, right? Just recently graduated, they would be raising their eyebrows at that. But definitely once you get below 18, right? Because now 18 has become sort of this magical number of,
Mhm.
when a person apparently becomes mature enough to literally sell their own life away or whatever. Um, So that's its own kind of issue, right? Like the incoherence, the logical nature of choosing 18, which really makes no sense because it's something like 5 years after your body transforms into an adult. Um, it's also
Well, starts to transform into adult.
yes, but I'm saying that, whenever we think about these things, we're always looking at what happened in history. Okay,
Hmm.
which is not to say that it's going to be correct. But when you see that overwhelmingly 99% of the time, right, somebody was considered an adult around 12, 13, um, there must be some kind of reason for that when it's happening across time, across geography, across cultures, right? There's going to be something there that we want to pay attention to. There's a big hint that maybe we are the ones actually off. So yeah, it starts there, but I also think that we don't really come to understand that it finishes up sooner than we need it to, or we're expecting it to. Okay. So if we're looking at it, yes, it starts around that age and then continues for some time, and then maybe the skeletons, finish up. But at the same time, we're kind of recognizing, okay, this is about the time for people to get married. So let's look at the ages historically speaking. Historical speaking in, say, like East Asia and such, right? Places that have a very clear idea of what marriage is and when a good time or not is, um, and have carried on that for many, many generations. You would see something around the age of approximately 15, 16 for women, and then about 20, maybe 18 to 20 for men. Okay. And that's when, you would get married. All right. And so if you're looking at it from that standpoint, um, we need to pay attention to maybe why that would be. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of explain what's going on there just traditionally. So you wouldn't have dating, right? You wouldn't be out there. In fact, if you look at, say, the Joseon Dynasty, um, that's the last kingdom of Korea, and that was very Confucian, right? It was built on Ru principles and Ru understanding. So back in those days, what they would do is that a number of years, even before puberty, so around 8, they would actually start to segregate the genders. Okay, so unless this person was a family member, you wouldn't really be spending time with them if they were of the opposite sex. Okay, so they would do that for a number of years because that's around the time basically you would start having crushes on people. Okay, I don't know if you could remember, but there's no real such a thing as a 6-year-old having a crush, but you might see that with like a 10-year-old, having a kind of a crush there, right? So the idea here is that okay, you're going to be betrothed, you're going to be married, and you want to have a pure heart going into that marriage. So you're not going to have this emotional baggage where you were really hoping for somebody else, but you're going to get married to somebody else instead, right? If you've watched uh, Gone with the Wind, there's a Scarlett O'Hara's big problem here that she wants to be with Ashley throughout the entirety of the story. And then she ends up with different men, and she's just never faithful in heart to them because she's always pining for Ashley, right? So it's to prevent that kind of situation from occurring. Okay. So then you get betrothed, then you get married, and then so you come into this chaste. Okay. So again, what chastity means is that you have no other husband before or after this marriage, right? So it's complete sexual exclusivity towards one person. Okay, that's what chastity is, okay, in the root sense. Okay. And that's different from, the Europeans, I don't know, they kind of have a different understanding of what that term means. Okay. All right. So then the husband and the wife have different roles, okay? And that accords with a recognition of the fact that male nature and female nature are indeed different, and they are rooted in biology. Okay, they're not always going to be the exact same. All men are not going to be the exact same as other men, and all women are not going to be the exact same either. But there are certain kind of tendencies, right? There are also certain biological limits, right? A woman needs to be pregnant for 9 months, and that limits their mobility. A woman is also physically weaker than men, right? So, particularly in the ancient world, those things need to be accommodated. And then so those set up certain roles. This is even before we get into certain neurobiological differences or hormonal differences with what testosterone does in men's not only physical abilities, but their kind of how they are emotionally and how they are logically versus women, how they are emotionally, how they are logically. Okay. I have a very nuanced look at this, and that's kind of um, you know, we aren't talking about gender roles today, right? Right now, we've covered that some other time. But you know, I'm not black and white on this issue, right? I'm not either or on this issue. I'm not saying that, men are not emotional. Men are very emotional. Okay. I'm not saying women are not logical. Some women are logical, and some of them are almost maybe frighteningly logical. Okay. So I'm not saying this, there's a subtlety to this, but that's kind of a different conversation. I'm just talking about, age gaps. Okay. But since we are traditionally expecting the men to be out there dealing with kind of larger world things outside of the family, whereas the women are at home cooking and cleaning and breastfeeding and raising the children, and spending time recovering from pregnancy and giving birth, and are physically uh, weaker than men, and men are out there, right? Um, it makes a little more sense for men to be older and to have a little bit more life experience there compared to the women. Okay. Also, women's fertility, of course, is a lot more compressed. It runs out sooner than male, right? So the men are out there, they're still fertile into their 30s, into the 40s, 50s, even 60s. All right. Whereas the women, right, it becomes very difficult once they reach 35, right? And before 35 is more gradual, right? So the women have to really they have limited years, right? So all of that means that it's going to be advantageous for the man to be older. Okay. Um, Also, I think that we kind of, you know, what is an argument, right, that you hear against age gap relationships that comes up very often? The argument is that, oh, well, the younger person is just, that person needs more life experience, all right? They haven't figured out who they are yet. And to me, that's the problem, right? There is no person to find out who you really are. Okay. You're always changing, and you should always strive to change. You should always strive to be better. You should always accumulate more wisdom. And part of wisdom is knowing how a person ought to be, right? So we're born, I don't know, what do you want to say? Bad? We're born bad, we're born poor, we're born insufficient, we are born incapable. We're born ignorant. Okay. We are not born the people that we should be. Okay. However you want to put it, right? Human beings are born sinful, right? If you want to be biblical about it. Human beings are born bad, if you want to take Shunzi, right? Even Mencius, right, who says human nature is good, will say that we're born with these seeds, but they haven't grown up yet, right? So clearly there is some kind of development we need to go through, all right? So the first thing is to say, okay, we're not supposed to find out who we are because who we are, what we're born with, is not necessarily that good, right? So we need to grow into a certain direction. We need to build into a certain direction. And I don't see why that means that we can't get married or we can't be in a relationship earlier, right? The second thing it connects to is the fact that as you get older, you become more situated into your habits. You become more stubborn in your habits, right? It becomes harder to bond to other people and to grow with them because when you grow a certain way, you just adjust to that naturally, right? So if you meet your husband or wife earlier on, you just grow with them together, right? And then you become soulmates. You're not supposed to be soulmates, and you just happen to find the person, right, that completely matches you, right? This is not like a puzzle where you find, oh, this piece directly connects to this other piece and no other piece. Okay, that's not really how you know human development really works at all. Okay, so you're supposed to grow into a moral sense, and that includes knowing how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife. And then you want to do that earlier so you're flexible, you can grow together. Okay. Those are actually benefits. All right. So that's an argument for why you want to start a little bit more earlier. Age gaps, right? Again, you're taking advantage of the older person's experience so that they can guide the younger person. Okay. That's the thing. Marriages, um, I think friendship is the only relationship where some of them, not even all of them, some of them can be equal. Okay. And I would actually say that that's not even how friendships should work. A good friendship, even a good friendship, right? You're not even married, right? Good friendship, you're teaching each other things based on your relative strengths, right? So, you have a friend, he's really good at fixing things of a physical nature, right? You might be really knowledgeable about history and politics. Well, you guys have good conversations and you guys help each other, right? Out of goodwill because your strengths are not the same. Okay. Or you have another friend, you're a scholar, he's a scholar, and you exchange perspectives. You help each other that way too, right? When it comes to age differences in relationships, I think we overestimate the problems that are in there. I mean, like, why does it matter that she grows up with a certain set of television shows and you grew up with different ones, right? Just show each other the shows that you grew up with, and then you get to watch it a second time and then bond over that. I mean, that's fun, right? Why do you need to have already watched the same things before you get into a relationship? It's bogus, right? The other thing is, of course, it's helpful to have different life experiences and to, for the older person to guide the younger person. The last thing is to note about this is that there's a dark side to allowing particularly women to grow older without meeting their husband. Okay, because what that implies is that they're going to be in a different relationship. And then being in a relationship implies that there's going to be things of a in a that uh lines of propriety are going to be crossed, and you know what I mean by that, right? So that deteriorates their chastity, which deteriorates their ability to bond properly to their husband in the future. Okay. And just think about it in terms of idealism. Just think about it in terms of beauty, right? It's just more beautiful, right? I mean, it's always the ideal that you find her, the person you're supposed to be with, you fall in love, and there's no heartbreak, right? Nobody, I mean, it's like nobody should ever think, and I don't think anybody really truly does deep down in their heart. Nobody ever really thinks, okay, I'll meet somebody, then my heart will be completely broken, and I'll be a wreck, and then find somebody else, and I'll think he's the one, and then my heart will be broken again, and I'll be completely right wrecked, and then I'll find the right person finally. And he wasn't really the most handsome person, he wasn't really the most charismatic person, but I know this person will never let me down. That's not a happy story. Okay. That might be realistic today, but our ancestors, or not maybe all of our ancestors, unfortunately, but if you got to live, the way of the past, the way of the Ru is to avoid that kind of problem in the first place, right? And the thing is, people underestimate how strongly they can bond just based off of hormones alone, right? Um, Procreating is the ultimate bonding act, okay? And so if you are chaste and you um the person who, I guess for lack of better phrasing, takes your virginity, right, is your spouse, right? Then that's the ultimate kind of bonding. Okay, so somebody who wasn't maybe the most attractive person you had ever seen, you know, your hormones will actually change your brain to perceive your spouse as actually the most attractive person you've ever met. Okay. That's what this does. All right. That's what happens here. That's the magic of it. It's truly a heavenly blessing. It's a God-given blessing to human beings. And so you want to make use of that gift. You don't want to abuse it. You don't want to neglect it. You don't want to misuse it. All right. Uh, do you have any other do you know of any other kinds of objections to like age gap relationships off the top of your head?
Not really an objection, but earlier when you mentioned like the 4 year cutoff being like the max amount of years, immediately I thought that's usually like the typical time someone is spent. That's usually the time someone spends in high school or in college. So I think due to that artificially created time spent at one institution, I think that's the reason. That's partially or even entirely the reason why that's seen as the max cutoff.
Yeah, I think so definitely. And a lot of people, especially who are kind of liberals in academia, for example, they always talk about social construct this, social construct that, and they use it to kind of advance a certain kind of direction, like to, in a sense, discourage marriage. But ironically, or perhaps not ironically, they don't, a lot of people do not recognize, okay, that 4 year thing or that the age 18 thing. Those are social constructs too, right? So, people who are professors who are gonna in sociology, they'll recognize 18 as a social construct, right? They'll recognize this 4 year gap thing as essentially socially constructed because they're perceptive, right? Uh, they have that insight. But if you just talk to like the average college student, all right, who is liberal, learning about how to use the term social construct as a way to deconstruct, and in his idea, deconstruction is equivocated to delegitimizing, right? So if you deconstruct something, that means you're delegitimizing the idea, which is not actually true, right? You could deconstruct an idea, see how the pieces connect, and then say, actually, this is a well-ordered machine, or this is a well-ordered thing, right? You could do that, but a lot of people in college don't do that. They just go, okay, let's deconstruct it. Oh, I deconstructed it. It must not be true. It must not be useful. No, that's not how you want to think about these things. But anyways, yeah, that's perceptive of you because um what is high school? What is college, right? Those are social constructs, right? And they should not really tell us that, okay, this is a boundary that shouldn't be crossed, right? Like if you are, if you are a 20-year-old and you know, you meet a 16-year-old, right? And you're like, well, this could be a good marriage, right? And you're proper, right? You're proper about your relationship, and then you court this person so that, when the time is right, you get married, right? So you get engaged, you start spending time with each other, then you agree to get engaged, you know, because nowadays nobody betroths, right? That's where your parents set you up here, right? Um, so you get engaged, and then you get married, right? That's all very orderly, okay? Um, and that is actually law abiding. And then so you get married, and then that's fine. But nowadays we stigmatize. You go, oh, what a creep! Like this guy's in college, and he's like hanging around this like high school, person, and they call them girls, right? Even though that's actually historically they would be considered women, right? Um, so oh, that's weird, that's creepy, and there's something wrong with it. Why is that wrong, right? Aren't you just presuming your own uh, degeneracy into the situation, right? Because these people are totally fine with two 15-year-olds sleeping together, even though that's extremely disastrous for both those parties involved, right? Like, because chances are they're not going to get married, right?
Yeah,
But they're
likely
already sleeping
lustful,
together. Oh, what's that?
likely lustful.
Right.
It's
It's probably
mainly physical attraction.
right. Um, So there's not that commitment there because if they were committed, where's the engagement ring, right? That's just not there. So somehow these guys are favoring disorder, right? And disorder really means dysfunction, right? Chaos, right? Okay, those are not fun terms. Okay, disorder and chaos and dysfunction are are manifestations of evil. That's what they are. So what you have when you have this thing where there's two 15-year-olds, they're both planning to go to college in 3 years, and they're probably never going to see each other again. That's disorder. That's chaos. That's perversion. That's dysfunction. That's evil. Okay? That's what's wrong. And the fact that people think that's normal, that's healthy, that's right. That really tells you how wrong this all is.
I think they'd be lying to themselves too if they prefer that. Because imagine going to college and you have your special someone situation all figured out, so you only have to focus on academia. That's one less distracting thought to be concerned about because you already have that part of your life figured out.
Right. And that's where career, you could tell the career takes priority over family because the family doesn't begin once you have your first kid. The family begins when you are looking for your spouse, right? Your own family. That's where the groundwork is set, right? If you try to raise a crop, you're not even thinking about the seed yet before, right? Before you plant the seed, before you find the right seeds, you need to till the ground, right? There's a lot of work that comes even before the seed is planted, right?
Yeah.
So here you need to actually figure these things out. You need to look for a spouse before you think about your children, right? Um, and so the reason why people are just going to be like, okay, none of this is real until college. And then once they're in college, what happens? They graduate, right? They graduate, they find a job, who knows where, right? It's not going to be in the same city. Then you have another point where people break up too, right? So you're just repeating this 4 years and then another 4 years. And then you're maybe at 22 at that point. And then I mean, it's just such a disaster, right? So when you have that situation going on, where you have 4 years and then 4 years, you know that you're prioritizing your career over your family, and you're already in that mentality, and you've already made very critical mistakes, right? So there's no coincidence that the American family is completely dysfunctional now because you did not do the equivalent of tilling the soil. You did not set your groundwork, okay? And so you cannot have a good relationship even with your children because you didn't have everything set up before that. And um, so this is something else to kind of think about is that, all right, if you guys are going to go to the same college, right? You're gonna go to the lowest common denominator between you two. Okay. The other option is the one of the spouses does not go to college, at least at that same time. Okay. But then now you're going to need an apartment, right? So this whole system, this is why I think that once once our society went into the direction of everybody should get a college degree, we were completely screwed. Okay. Because one, like we just talked about, the whole family is endangered as a consequence. Number two, now we're going to something else where um, the we have to always look at things in terms of supply and demand when it comes to economics. When you have all these people going to college, even though they're not that intellectual, what happens to the college degree? It inflates, right? All these people have a college degree. Now it's not worth that much. Now, in order to compete for the same jobs, unless you're directly in the trades, what you now have to do is you have to go through another 4 years of education to compete for the same jobs, which, by the way, are increasingly being downsized or sent abroad or whatever, right? They're kind of declining,
Yeah,
right?
dragging
And
on
by the
that
way,
academic
of course,
process.
there's not enough jobs in the trades. There's not enough jobs in the trades to cover everyone either. But yeah, what were you saying here?
Oh, I was gonna say like it's dragging on that academic timeline, like almost like postponing it even more.
The academic time or the beginning of a career?
Well, both. You spend more time in college, so then you have to postpone,
Oh,
increase
I see what you're saying.
barriers.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
just
increase
dragging out.
barriers and postponing. Yeah.
Right. So you spend more time in academia, and it creates more and more of a barrier to starting off your career, but you need to support your tiny atomistic family, right? Because you don't have clan, you don't have family estate, either in a financial or landed sense. It's all broken. Okay. So this is a culmination of many generations, by the way. I mean, if you look at the Constitution, it is actually against creating a sort of what you might call landed gentry, but really in effect, it just creates obstacles for families to remain as large families, as clans. Okay. Because it is anti-aristocratical, it's anti-monarchical in a very legalistic sense. That's a whole different conversation that, we can have another time. But you have a basically political social order that reduces families into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's a whole different, um, another different discussion that we could have. But in terms of age gaps, I think we've probably exhausted our discussion here. Anything else you want to talk about with it in regard to age gap relationships?
Mm, not really. Yeah. I think it also kind of natural too. Maybe
Yeah. Oh,
something to
yeah.
mention.
That too. I mean, just you know, women just generally are attracted to older men, and that might be frustrating when you're young, but when you're older, it just comes more naturally. Men are more attracted to younger women because, that's how you just can have more children, right? It's just you have more time with younger women to have more children than with older, So that's just how it generally happens. It's a very biological thing, and some of those age gaps are kind of significant. I mean, a lot of women in their teenage years are attracted to men in their mid and younger 20s, and that's also very natural, right? It just happens spontaneously. That's what I mean by natural. It just happens on its own. Nobody
Mhm.
has to be taught to feel this way. What is unnatural is this idea that you have to be with somebody of your same age. Okay, that's something that you have to be taught. Okay, so what's natural is not always what's good, right? What's natural is that human beings are bad. Okay, but you still need to identify what is natural, what is not natural, and whether that's good or whether that's good or bad, right? Those are two different axes, right? Two different categories, and then you need to see where they line up and they don't line up, and then act accordingly.